I noticed that the evolution of my experiences, I started getting visuals in a sense where first I would be at a round table, but then representatives of not just different nationalities, ethnicities within people, but also like different kinds of being. And what started happening from there was a lot more of a focus on this collective thing that's happening on the planet right now. My curiosity is just your take on that. Is that predominantly the fact that I just kind of cleared some of my shit and I'm allowed to graduate to this level? Do you feel that these experiences are also changing with time for the collective?
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting question. First of all, when I unpack some of the things that you said, there's commonalities for a lot of people, like the roundtables and meeting the head medicine beings of ayahuasca and beings from, other locations. And so I'm not really sure how like sci-fi, the way it gets presented in a Hollywood movie, this really is as more like intradimensional. And I like to think that in a expanded dimensional kind of capacity of the field that we call the universe, that there's the ability for these other kinds of beings to exist in consciousness and communicate through consciousness itself, which I think is a really unexplored frontier and one of the last places for the this generation of pioneers. And so I think there's a lot of language that gets used that ends up being confusing for people when they're trying to understand, unpacking kind of like what you're saying, like, oh, where do those beings come from? And, were they in a spaceship and those kinds of things? I think that, we're really talking about something that is more like a manifestation within a vision itself. And it seems when you're in those visions that it's completely ordinary and normal that those beings would be sitting there, although it is usually quite impactful. It's like, incredible that it's happening, but it certainly doesn't have that sort of hyper vibe of like sci-fi Hollywood associated with it. It's much more like you really are at a round table and there really are a bunch of beings there and they really are interested in discussing the future of the planet and what we can do to improve it and better it. And it seems like ayahuasca, as well as other visionary medicines, are connected to these interdimensional beings that are found within our consciousness. I don't think this is like an us versus them thing. It's like somehow part of us, like deep in the roots of what we are, is really interested in actually preserving the planet, doing something great for humanity, really helping and calling us to become part of that mission, calling us to become part of a solution instead of a continuation of a problem. And that's actually becoming more and more common. I think that's also very fascinating and very important to understand that somehow there's a intraconnection between us all in this space that are utilizing these plant medicines. We're able to communicate with the plant itself. Sometimes it's just like direct and you're getting messages. Other times it's coming through like visions like you're talking about, but that there is an impetus and a desire for positivity, improvement, solution-oriented, creative problem solving, and it's always on a very big scale. It's always on a planetary scale or an interdimensional scale. It's about consciousness itself and about this evolution that's taking place. The second part of that, which is also fascinating, is there an actual evolution taking place within the plants, within consciousness, and within this interface that all these people from around the world are now engaging with, interacting with, and experiencing? And it would only make sense to me that it is evolving, and that as more people participate and interject into these spaces, that hybridization of consciousness, sort of like the flower of life, like the infinite Venn diagram, would take new shape and form and allow new thoughts to be intra-shared amongst all of us that are participating, and that would also allow the plants in this incredible expression of consciousness to express themselves in new ways, gain new visions, evolve in their own right, and also help guide and direct what they need as well within the world. To think that somehow we're like more than just the dominant species here and that we have right to take over absolutely everything and use it however we would like, I think is a sadly very human arrogant perspective to take. And I think the other species are looking for a way to not only help wake us up, but also to kind of scream at us or very, very kindly say in a very nice way, please do something good for this planet. Please help us in a very direct, important way. Please support what's going on and do something about it. Please organize around it and I always think the other part of that, which is also counter our own mythology, is that it's never in a sort of sense of conflict. So you go to these roundtables, you meet these beings, they're there, they're speaking about what the future looks like, and it's all positive about what can happen. And some things are, showing or telling about how, some of the negatives that have taken place. But it's not like this is all broken and there's no hope and it's over, but rather it's actually an incredible opportunity, and it's a desired opportunity, and they love the fact that you're there and they want you to be there and they're welcoming you to the conversation. So I just think that that's a fantastic expression of that evolution, and we hear more and more of it now in the space, and I would only welcome that, as much as we possibly can.
I hear a lot of people is like, oh, I developed ESP through the medicine and now like it won't go away. How much should we place on the collective reality of maybe some of these gifts and these capacities are coming up? And how much should we just kind of keep them close to the chest as we cultivate them until we learn about them a bit more?
I think you need to balance each kind of visionary experience you have with the nature of who you are and who your audience is, and really seek to be understood, to understand your own experiences and visions. On the personal side of it, I just see that a lot of people pre-conclude ideas about this before they realize they have to go through a process of evolution with those kinds of visions themselves. Like there's so many places to be able to conjure fear out of what you said, but there's also so many things to unpack, like, well, how and why? And so when you were talking about that, I was thinking about other experiences I've had that are similar, and what that ultimately would mean in the long run. And we certainly see a culture that sadly has been sort of following what we think of from Christianity as like hell and the sins, like coming along and creating apocalyptic conditions for the climate and the environment, creating apocalyptic health-based conditions. And you could say, what we went through with COVID-19 was pestilence, and that pestilence came through the population at a global level. We are seeing a lot more kinds of natural disasters, and increase in all different forms of climate change as well, and all the difficulties that come associated with that. It's not hidden understanding. It's everywhere. There's even like commercials about it, that someday, we don't know when, but water is going to be the source of war, and that there isn't going to be clean water enough for the entire species, et cetera, et cetera. It goes on and on and on. And I just stop and I think, who's creating that? Who's actually behind creating all of these situations? And the only group that's creating this are Homo sapiens sapiens. It's the humans of this planet are creating that situation, and they're creating it for themselves. They're creating it for their own species, which seems like a weird form of predation, that your own species would predate upon its own species within its own countries and cross countries around the world at the same time. I think while it's sad to hear that, I do understand why we would be headed in that direction. And I think part of the solutions around that is, what can we actually do to make things fairer and more balanced and ultimately better for everybody? And how do we make sure that we have food for everybody? If there's visions of famines coming, well, maybe we should prepare. And if there's, if there were ice ages that made a bunch of other species go extinct, maybe we should get prepared for cold. If it's going to get really hot, maybe we should learn how to figure out what to do with that and start to evolve. So I hear what could cause fear, and I like to turn the fear off. Don't create it about it. Think, actually, this is a telling direction of where our species is going. Lots of people have talked about it in their own right, too, from their own experiences. And it's something that we need to go through and ultimately deal with, because we are the ones who are creating these problems. We can't push these problems off to a third party. We can't make it someone else's problems. We can't turn it over to a kind of divinity that isn't here part of Earth, that's doing this to us, like our ancestors 5,000 to 10,000 years would have said. I think we have to take total responsibility for what we're currently creating, and understand that this is our problem and we are the solution. In terms of talking about it and sharing visionary experiences with others, well, I think you have to pick your audience to really describe the nature of those experiences and give the right context to it. So, some of these experiences we need to hold very close to the chest. They're our own. I think when they're fully realized, it's easier for people to understand than when we kind of put half-baked understandings out there. We can share more about it and try to make it make sense.